Good evening. Good evening, and welcome back to Coaching You For You. My name is Annette, and I am your host here at Coaching You For You. I am grateful to have you here. And before we get started, of course, as always, I'd like to remind you that most of what I share is my experience, strength, and hope. And tonight, I'm sharing on this topic because I was with some folks over the past 2 weeks, and this topic kept resurfacing about relationships and what women think and what men think. And so I took a chance and put it out on Facebook in various groups outside this area. Some inside, but most outside, and for obvious reasons, outside the area. But what I want to share and what I want you to know is this: the men did respond. They responded. And they had quite a bit to say. And tonight I chose to share on three of them. And I promised not to divulge their full names. And that's important because I asked for transparency and honesty in the discussion. And so some of them posted directly to the pages that I posted, and others inboxed me. And for all of you, who are listening now or who will come on later, I want you to know that I'm keeping my commitment not to let you to protect your anonymity. Okay? I'm keeping my commitment to do that. And so, one of the things I know for sure, I absolutely know for sure, is that relationships with us and others is difficult. It's tough. It can be tough. The relationship first with yourself, because if you don't acknowledge and accept who you actually are, it makes everything you do so much more difficult. It does. But don't stay stuck in that. You can always move past that. You can always do something different. And tonight, we're just going to share a little bit about what the men thought. Because in some of the conversations I've had over the past couple of weeks, one of the things that was absolutely certain, you're looking at my yoga ball, and I don't like that. That's my yoga chair. We'll let it stay there for tonight. One of the things that I think was critical to the conversation with them, and there were more men in this conversation and in this little retreat and group than there were women. And they suggested that I put the question out. So I did. And one of the biggest things is that so many people have been hurt that they don't trust anymore. That's a big deal. But that's one of the topics that came up, just one. And that most people jump right into relationships before healing. Now, these are conversations that we had directly with those who were in the group and participated in the conversation. So those were direct conversations. And one of the other things was that men were reluctant often to share how they felt for various reasons. And I asked, what's the problem in relationships? What does Sam Hill and Jill is going on out here? What's going on? We've talked about polluted pools. We've talked about different issues that impact people. But what's really going on? What's going on? Is it alignment? Are people not aligned properly? What is it? Is it communication? Is it not being able to see first beyond looks and not recognizing, the personality or the person, that people are? And I want to remind you all to hydrate, moisturize your hands, feet, and face, and mind your business. Yeah, stay out of other people's business. Do that when you can. It's a good look. Was it never a good fit? I mean, what is it? I had so many questions because the dating arena as I know it or have known it, is absolutely insane. And people, are they dating? Are people dating anymore? And then there are some men who want to jump directly to marriage. Stop it. There are some men who felt like marriage would fix whatever was going on with them. So this was the group conversation. But one of the things that I think presented itself most is that men said they want generally the same thing women want, and that is friendship, companionship, and chemistry. Friendship, companionship, and chemistry. And I thought that was interesting because if it's just that simple, and there are so many single people, good single people, why are we still single out here? What's going on? What's happening in relationships? And so, because my memory is not always the best, I printed several responses. Okay? You can see these are from the internet. I don't want you to see names. But the first one was a guy I'll call C. I'll use his first initials. He said, and I'm reading directly from his comments, first and foremost, find out what a man is. Do you know what a man is? Because there are a lot of boys playing around out here. I thought that was interesting. And know the difference between a grown man and a boy. That's interesting. And it's true. You have to know the difference because in age does not always determine whether they're grown or not. So they said, C says, find out, if it's a man, if he's a man or a boy, and you'll be able to tell simply by the things he does and the way he behaves. Just pay attention. You don't pay attention. You want the looks, you want the money, now this question was for men. And I want you to remember, I've posted and said I'm going to come back and ask the same question of women. What's up with relationships? What's the problem? What do men see as issues presenting in relationships? How do they see relationships and what are they looking for? And C says that, you have to come prepared to deal and be healed, to be healed, to be able to deal appropriately in relationships. And so, in coming in and being prepared, you have to understand what that means. You got to be prepared to trust again if you've been hurt. So if you haven't healed and you start to jump into another relationship, all you do is bleed on somebody else and create issues that weren't there in the first place. This is coming directly from C. And recognizing that relationships, he says, recognize that relationships are partnerships, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And that if he's not for you, no, if the relationship is for you, you have to know that there's no real secrets. You cannot have secrets in the relationship because having secrets in the relationship is what starts to break the relationship down. That a man, he says, a man who genuinely loves a woman will put everything on the table and share, what it is he needs and believes. That's interesting commentary. And I think that a lot of it, actually most of it, is true. If a man really wants you, if a man is really into you, he'll come prepared to work with you. The other thing comes from, the other response comes from a guy who I'll just call Guy. So as not his comments, so as not to expose his anonymity. And he says that a large part of problems in relationships come from partners trying to tweak, add to, or remake the man. That's interesting. Welcome. Welcome to my sister, Miss Martin. And she comments and says, and I ask you all to comment, first, grown men have to stop acting like boys. And that is exactly what C said. You have to, guys, see. He says, you have to know the difference between a man and a boy. And if you pay attention, you'll be able to spot them right off because there's no way of hiding who and what they actually are. If you pay attention, you simply have to pay attention. But Guy says, stop trying to tweak us and remake us. If you accepted us into the relationship and you took the time to get to know us, take us as we are, he says. And if he needs to adjust in his care and concern for you in the relationship, he will. He'll do it. Guy says he'll do it. I think that's a lot of what C said in terms of what men are looking for and what they want in a mate and what they can accept. Guy says, I cannot accept a partner who believes that they can change me. If they think they can change me, they've already lost the game. And in losing the game, he says, you have already misunderstood me and why I'm here. You have to take me as I am. And if you take the time to get to know who I am, you won't struggle so much with who I actually am. And we all know that initially when you start dating, the real person doesn't show up for a while. So if you just give yourself a chance to get to know him, he says it'll make the difference for both of us. Now, these are guys who took the time to respond. Another response was, you don't listen to us. In relationships, our partners typically don't listen. And they don't listen because they're spending a lot of time preparing their response. That sometimes, not all, he emphasizes that, but sometimes women are unnecessarily combative. And he uses the word women and partner interchangeably. He says sometimes women can be extremely combative, that it has to be a fight. If we don't agree, let's just simply not agree. It doesn't have to be, he says, it doesn't have to be a fight. It doesn't have to be an ongoing argument. And how do you guys get to retain so much past history? You'll bring things up from 20 years ago. As C said, if you accept me, no, that was Guy. Guy said, if you accept me in the relationship, accept who I am. So if a man comes into a relationship, now I'm going back to the table where I was with a group of people and we had some conversation, and it just so happens that some of these things are very similar. Their partner's not listening, trying to tweak them, remake them, continuously combative, arguing, finding reasons not to agree, not trusting, coming in relationships unhealed. These things, and I made a list of them as they said them and as they documented them in the text on the post or in the messages, they're all resounding. They keep coming back. They keep coming back. And so I asked one guy specifically, and I'll name him A, what role do you think you play in the disagreement? What role do you think you play in relationships not working? What role do you think you play? And A was real honest. He said, I've gotten in relationships that I knew were not going to work. It was a situation where I needed and wanted to be with somebody. I didn't want to be alone. I had just come out of a long-term horrible relationship, and I just wanted to be with somebody. But he said right from the beginning, he knew it wasn't going to work. And I said, why did you stay in it? Why did you stay in it? What do you think happens when you're in a relationship with a partner? Allergies, as you can see. When you're in a relationship with a partner who believes that you're going somewhere and you're doing something and you absolutely have no intentions of being there. How do you expect your partners to heal and be prepared to deal in relationships realistically if you're saying that you go into a relationship knowing that you don't have any long-term plans for that relationship? And he said, if partners would just listen. When I come in and I say right from the beginning, I don't want anything serious, no matter what happens after that, unless I tell you something different. I don't want anything serious. Whew. Now, for those of you listening and coming on and jumping in and out, I want you to know that number one, you're wasting time for yourself and your partner. You're wasting time. Remember that. You're wasting time. Very valuable time. Time is short. I had plans to travel, do road trips, see the world, see the country, and my partner died. Those were plans. Live while you're living. Act like you're an adult when you're an adult. Be fair and be honest in your relationships. Now, ladies, next week we're going to have some of these very same questions, and you're not going to like it because some of the things these guys talked about and were willing and able to share are facts. They're facts. Learn to listen. If he says he doesn't want anything, he doesn't want anything. If he's got more than one partner, he's going to have more than one partner as long as he can until one or the other says no more. If he's not trustworthy in the beginning, he's not going to be trustworthy later. And actually, Richard said that. Richard in the Table Talk said that. He said, if I'm misbehaving coming in, what do you think is going to change me? What do you think is going to make me change? If my, personality is to misbehave, what do you think is going to change me? If I tell you, excuse me, I love watermelon water. If I tell you I don't want a relationship, I mean it. If I tell you I'm not settling down, I mean it. If I tell you I don't want to be married, I mean it. If I tell you that I'm not a one woman man, I mean it. Richard said, we don't listen. Partners don't listen. And then you think you can tweak and remake them once you're in a relationship because you think, some things will be so good and they'll be so happy and they'll want to change. A man's not going to change till he wants to change. And thanks for sharing that, Richard, because it's true. A man's not going to change until he wants to change. And so when I talk to them about relationships, I'm telling you, they said so much more. And some of it I knew, coming into this podcast might be offensive. But the biggest thing is listening, trust, healing, not bringing your old baggage to the relationship, accepting them where they are. So if you're dealing with a man, right? And Richard says, if you're dealing with a man and the man is cheating with you, he's going to cheat on you. I don't have too much experience in that area. And I did ask for the opinion of men. And so men have a tendency to, when given the opportunity and limited exposure, to just be honest. And that's what Richard said. He said, I got into a relationship I was with two other women, actually, he said. And I told everybody, I don't, I see other people, I'm not ready to settle down. And the last, third relationship got pregnant. And although he says he took full responsibility because she didn't get pregnant alone, which I admire. I also admire that he says he was honest, and I believe him. He says he was honest with all three of them. That he agreed to take care of the child and not be in the relationship. And so, of course, my question was, so you want to get out of the relationship now because there's a child? And he said, no, because right from the door, I made it clear I didn't want a commitment. I was seeing other people. I didn't want to have children. So, you know what my question was? What'd you do to ensure that you didn't have any children? He said, she promised me she would take care of it. I said she did. She got pregnant. And so you have just as much responsibility there as she does, bottom line. And so I'm trying to convince the table, because I know these guys, to come live onto the podcast. And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to do that eventually. But a lot of men are camera shy. And I get it. And so are women. A lot of people are camera shy. But learning to respect a man, where he is, what he says, how he feels, and where he's going in a relationship is important. So I want to thank C. I want to thank Guy. I want to thank Richard. And I want to thank the other guy who I called, I forget, but there's 3 or 4 of them in here. I just want to thank them for their honesty. And I want to ask the women who are listening to pass along and feel free to come onto the podcast live and or share. And so one response is that because there was never a relationship, he was upfront, but he left himself out there. He did leave himself out there. So for all the men listening or who are going to pick up and listen, because I find that most people, 3, 4, 5 people come on here and then over 100, 200 people look at the podcast. And so for the men who will watch this podcast, although you're being upfront and you're making it clear that you don't want kids and you don't want a relationship, you have to really act like that, and you have to protect yourself so that you don't create another human being who is going to be without both parents for whatever reason. And of course, single parents get it done, but when and where they don't have to, they shouldn't have to. And so I want to thank you for joining me here tonight. My question was, and it was very broad, and I left it broad intentionally because I don't want to frame or put a frame around the answers that might be provided. I simply asked men about relationships and what would they say to women about relationships. And so those were some of the responses. The biggest one was, partners, don't listen. I hope you listened tonight. I hope you heard. And I have another question. Why do women and men accept being in relationships with multiple people at one time? I can't answer that because that is certainly not my venue under any circumstances. I don't share. I don't share well. Nope, I don't share well, number one. And number two is when I'm in it to win it. Do something different. I promise you, if you forget how to love me, I'll remember how to leave you. I'm not doing multiples. Okay? For those of you who do, I don't knock it. Whatever, to each his reach, whatever you do. I just wanted to share with you some of the thoughts of men, grown men, who are fully self-supporting, getting it done in relationships, being honest about who, where, and why they're there, and what they think some of our weaknesses are. And so I want to thank them again for sharing. I want to thank the ladies who joined tonight. They're very special to me. So thank you very much for joining. We'll be back again next week after I pose the question in several groups and on the advertisement, the same question for women. I want to hear from you. There's so much going on out here. There's so much stuff backwards. There's so many different things happening. These types of relationships, I don't know and understand. I just simply don't. And if that means I'm behind the times, baby, I'm going to stay behind the times. Because if it's mine, it's mine. If it's yours, it's yours. But one thing's for certain and two things for sure. I ain't sharing mine. Not knowingly. Have a good night. Remember to hydrate. Watermelon water is my choice because I have to drink water and I don't always like plain water. Moisturize your feet, your hands, and your face, and mind your business. Mind your business. Reach out to a guy, for those of you who are listening, and ask him, what do you think's going on in relationships these days? The other thing I want to tell you is that when I posted in these groups, some of the women instantly attacked. Why do you want to hear from them? Isn't it odd that as a woman, you're asking a man what he thinks about relationships? Because it's a man I'm going to be in a relationship with. So thank you and have a good night. Thanks for joining me.